Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the National E-Learning Center podcast series about digital credentials to promote trusted online learning for all. Today, credentials play a critical role in recognizing the competencies earned by the learners, especially with the phenomenal growth of online learning for upskilling and reskilling. It is essential for us to understand the role of digital credentials in the life learning process and ecosystem. So, in this special podcast series, we will explore aspects of credentials from innovation, standards, and policymaking, and their impact on bridging between the labor market demand and supply from the perspective of academia and industry. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by a special guest, Wendy Palmer, Director of Global Studio Deakin University. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest to the podcast. Welcome, Wendy. May you please tell our listeners more about yourself?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm from Deakin University, which is in Australia, and I've been working at Deakin for about 7 years in various forms of short-form learning. And in the last couple of years, we've been focusing very much on micro-credentials. And the micro-credentials we've been looking at are credit-bearing so that they're able to be used within our degrees. But what we've also been doing is developing them with our industry partners and looking at a number of different ways in which we can do that.
So it is interesting to know how you have brought innovation in upskilling and reskilling of learners in partnership with the industry. Could you please share some of your experience?
Certainly. So one of the things that we started when we were looking at this and how we would work with industry, very much determining what was the role of each of the parties. You know, why would industry want to work with academia? What role did academia play? There's lots of short courses out there. So what would be the value proposition of bringing it together? So a lot of the thinking we did, and I think the innovation was around the models of how we could take workplace training, work with our industry partners, and then how that could then become part of the degrees. So very much when we first started working with the industry partners, what was quite interesting is there was a real appetite from industry, but one of the barriers in the past is that universities tend to, they provide very long courses, very long, very formal. And a lot of the industry partners wanted courses that were short and really helped to sort of upskill their workforce. So part of the innovation was looking at how we could still put an academic lens or academic rigour on that process whilst working with our industry partners, and they could bring their knowledge of their industry, their knowledge of their capability requirements, and the university bringing our quality assurance and our knowledge of teaching. And it was how we put those together that we've been working on in different models.
Do you see that stackable credentials are the future of upskilling and reskilling?
I'm biased because it's the area that I work in, but most definitely over the last many years, there's been changing trends in how people work, how people manage their career, and often they'll change jobs, they'll change careers, they'll reskill. But for a long while, university didn't sort of really keep pace with that, and it was still very much you went to university, then you went off to your career. Whereas I see with the stackable micro-credentials a real opportunity for people to move in and out of higher education and to be able to consume higher education in much smaller pieces that suit what they're doing. Somebody who's in their mid-40s and already established as a professional, if they want to move up, they don't necessarily want to take on another 3-year degree. They might want something really short and focused. Or alternatively, we have a lot of people who've already have masters. They're out there working, but they did their masters a number of years ago. So a good example is someone who did a Masters of IT 10 years ago. They've missed blockchain, they've missed cybersecurity, and there's whole gaps in their knowledge. They don't want to come back for another Masters, but stackable micro-credentials are a really good way to help them re-engage with that university education without the long formal component to it.
So what problems did these stackable credentials solve?
For us, one of the problems that stackable credentials solved was the ability to be able to work with industry and to devise a product or a learning experience that was attractive to our industry partners. And again, I think a lot of our industry partners showed a real desire to want to work with the university, but often there was a barrier there. So from that side of it, it's meant that we've been able to work with industry to make something much more relevant to industry and industry needs. From a student perspective, we've actually been able to provide a lot more flexibility. University timetables are often quite structured. You can only start once or twice a year, whereas with our stackable micro-credentials, they're available at any time. People can start learning. We also have very flexible delivery, so you can do them quickly or you can take a lot longer. So our experience so far has shown that we're filling a need there for people who don't want to be tied into a formal structure. So again, part of the problem is there's a lot of people who want to reskill or upskill, but a micro-credential gives them that opportunity to do it without a huge commitment.
Correct. So if I were wanting to learn something new in my field, let's say, you said in IT, let's say something in health or something in education, and then I would come and take some of these courses as stackable or micro-credentials. So I can come to your university and do so, right?
That is correct. We actually have a few courses in health and wellbeing and health and psychology. But yes, that's the idea. So they can be pathways out of formal degrees. So once you've completed a degree for upskilling, but they can also be pathways in. You might have done a bachelor's and then a few years down the track, you want to move up, you want to top up your skills, but again, you're not ready for postgraduate, and here's an opportunity. And so we talk about them as being stackable and bankable. You can put them in the bank and then you can use them at a later point.
Because life is changing and education is evolving. So if I've graduated 10 years ago, something definitely is new. And I don't want to go and have a full education, but I just want to learn this small bit from a university, right?
Yeah, very much so. One of the groups that we're working with and have shown real interest around this, and it's not just Deakin University, I've talked with other universities, is our own alumni. People who've done a degree with us, they know us, they trust us, we already have a relationship, and they're actually quite keen to come back and learn more from us. But the barrier has been is that they already have a degree, they don't want another one. And so we're finding a lot of interest and uptake from within the alumni population.
What are the opportunities for the pre-graduates?
We haven't been working specifically in pre-graduate, and we see for the school leaver there may be opportunity to do some credentials within school, but that would be a little bit different. Where we do see them as benefiting sort of pre-graduate is if you've gone into the workforce without any higher ed or tertiary education, then you may have worked for 10 years. Then coming back into higher ed, there's a lot of barriers around, you don't have a bachelor's, whereas what we're working on is the idea that you might be able to come in and do micro-credentials and then use those as an alternative entry pathway. And that's certainly something that, again, Deakin and other universities in Australia are saying, how could we do that for professional people who don't want to go right back to the bachelor's? You've got 10 years experience. How can we provide you with alternative pathways in? So again, that's where we talk about pathways in, out, and sort of through education.
So what was the impact in the short term of applying stackable credentials?
So there's been a number of impacts, and I'll talk about the impact sort of within the university. It's provided a different way of looking at education and also developing education. And one of the impacts has been that where we've had degrees, and a full degree is actually quite hard to update and it's quite hard to change. But what we've been working on is if you can include room for micro-credentials, it's then very easy, because if somebody can do any 2 micro-credentials out of a suite of 10, it improves the flexibility of what students can do, but it also means that we can quite quickly add in topical learning. So rather than trying to stand up a whole new full degree, we're looking at how we incorporate that within our curriculum. So that's been one impact. The other one has been the impact on some of the relationships we have with our existing industry partners. So a lot of the partnerships that we have with with industry are very much focused on either advisory boards or they're focused on research. And there hasn't really been an opportunity for the industry partners to then come in and be involved in teaching and learning. And over the last sort of year and a half, we've worked to build up a sort of a community of industry partners that are associated with Deakin and looking at how we can leverage that community and build that community. So it's had quite an interesting impact on both of those, both the university, our industry partners, and we've also had some really positive feedback from our alumni population. So we're actually seeing it ripple through a number of areas, but we are still at early days. So we're looking forward to what happens as it becomes more and more sort of built into what we do.
So what you're doing is really interesting, having the academia and industry all working in one community. What is your recommendation for the industry and academia to work jointly on building stackable credentials to make learners ready for with future skills?
So probably one of the recommendations is that we realised quite early on that we didn't share the same language when we talked about education, career, and so one of the first things was really trying to ensure we were all on the same page and that we were able to develop a shared language in the way we talked about things and the way we described things. The second one was really working with industry, and I said it right at the start, that concept of the value proposition. So what's the value for the partner and how they might want to contribute? What's the value for the university? But also, then what's the value for the learner? And why would we work together with this partner, or why would they work with us? And what need are we trying to address? And the third piece of advice is around making pathways really explicit. Mm-hmm. So if what you're doing can lead into a degree or more degrees, being quite explicit about that so learners know where they can go next. Or alternatively, if there's really clear pathways into jobs, being really explicit about that. Often it's very easy to just make generalised statements, but our experience with learners has been, yes, but what can I actually do with it? Mm-hmm. And so it's having those conversations between the industry partner and ourselves to say, where might this lead to, what jobs, what further education, and then being able to translate that into something that is really clear for the learner.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you for the enjoyable podcast. Thanks for listening to the National E-Learning Center podcast with your host, Al-Hanouf. We hope you enjoyed our episode about stackable credentials and the role of academia and industry. As always, you can visit our website, nelc.gov.sa, to know more about our news. And don't forget to check our resources page. That's it for now. See you next time.